Hello and welcome to TOEFL Masterclass, Advanced Strategies for High Scores. And today we are here with Kathy Spratt. She is the owner of House of TOEFL. Her website is houseoftoefl.com, where she offers writing and speaking evaluations and private tutoring sessions for TOEFL students. She is also author of the book, Mastering the Reading Section for the TOEFL IBT. Kathy, we are so happy you are with us today. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. These are interesting times we are living in, but I'm grateful because it gives us the time to offer this webinar to TOEFL students out there. So weird, but also finding the gratitude every day for the little things.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Kathy, how long have you been teaching TOEFL and how did you start?
So I started teaching TOEFL back in 2008, and I sort of fell into it because I was an ESL teacher before that. And the school I had been working at here in California, they needed a TOEFL teacher. And no one on the staff knew anything about the TOEFL, including myself. So I was asked by the owner if I could be the TOEFL teacher, and he gave me a stack of TOEFL books, which I took home. And I remember initially thinking this is something I might do for a year at the most, but it's been about 12 years since that time, and I've continued on with it. I actually prefer it to ESL at this point. It was a tremendous learning curve at first, obviously. I didn't know anything about this test I was about to teach. I remember being very nervous about that. But now, of course, it's been so long that I can't see myself really teaching anything else. I really enjoy teaching TOEFL, actually.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Actually, I have like the identical story of how I started teaching TOEFL was the story you just told.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah. I think there are a lot of maybe ESL teachers that kind of shy away from teaching TOEFL because your students think it's a big and scary test for them, but some teachers think it's a big and scary test for them to teach. So a lot of teachers might not want to step up for that challenge, but I'm so glad you did because I know how talented a teacher you are, and I know how your students have experienced such success. So I'm so glad that TOEFL found you and you found TOEFL.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the TOEFL reading book that you wrote for students. I know reading is one of the hardest sections on the TOEFL test for students. So tell us a little bit about your book and how it helps students.
Okay, I just want to start to your point as far as the TOEFL being challenging with the reading. Actually, as a native speaker and a TOEFL teacher, the reading, I think for myself, is even the hardest section. So I decided to try to write a book to address the difficulties of it. Because what I was seeing over and over when I was taking practice tests and not always getting 100%, even as a native speaker, I started to identify the fact that there were so many tricks and traps they put in, ways that they would twist answers in order to fool you, whether you were a student or a native speaker. So the purpose of my book is actually to reveal those tricks so that when the students see them, they can identify them and say, oh, that's a false comparison, or that's an added information answer, and so on. And they won't fall into the same traps that, frankly speaking, I fell into when I first started teaching TOEFL. Even I was falling into those traps because I didn't know them. So I would pick an answer that looked good, but wasn't actually correct. So the way my book is set up is that every chapter is about a different question type. And then at the very end, there are 4 practice tests. And I have the 3rd edition coming out. And that will probably be out by the time this video is out, actually. I've been working on that since October of 2019. So I had to adjust it because they changed the test. So I had to really revamp a lot of it. I had to update a lot of it, and I added a lot of material as well. So I actually think the 3rd edition is by far the best edition so far. So I would say even if you have the 2nd edition, get the 3rd edition because they're quite different actually.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I know how much goes into developing a book. And we really, looking at the TOEFL textbooks that are out there, some of them are just really set up in a very difficult way to understand and almost make the TOEFL more confusing instead of easier. And I bought your book, and
Yes.
I love the format, and I love how you break every question down so it's easy to understand. And I think that's, it's what I'm looking for. It's what students are looking for. We so need those kinds of books out there on the market that are available for students. So thank you for that contribution, because it's huge amount of work to create the
Yes.
questions, to create the text, and all yourself. So thank you.
It took about, if you include the modifications, the second edition and then the third edition, I'd say this has been a 3-year project on and off, at least 3 years. And yes, you're right. It's a lot of work in researching. And another thing I wanted to say that I forgot was I found that in regular TOEFL books that I was getting, that I was teaching from, they would tell the students the correct answer. But what bothered me was they didn't tell the students why the other answers were incorrect, right? So let's say I'm a student and I pick A, and then the answer key says the answer is actually C. Okay, that's fine, but I still, if I'm the student, don't know why the one I picked was wrong. So what I decided to do with my book was not only tell them, A, this is the correct answer, but also why the other 3 were wrong. So if they picked one of the other 3, they wouldn't be sitting in the dark wondering, why was my answer incorrect then? And so, because it's important to not only know why a certain answer is right, but it is just as important, if not more important, to know why the other answers are wrong. So that was missing in every book I looked at. And after years and years of having students ask me in the classroom, but why is my answer choice wrong? I realized this was a big gap that needed to be filled. So that's another reason I wrote my book.
Yeah,
Hopefully
absolutely. Yeah.
Hopefully that's more helpful than just giving the correct answer with no further comment.
Yeah, it's super helpful, because we need to know, hey, why is this wrong? That's actually the learning moment. I don't need to learn when I get the answer correct. I need to learn, why am I getting this wrong? And usually there's a pattern there, which your book points out so well. So Kathy, another question for you. What do you enjoy most about working with international students?
Well, what I really enjoy is getting to know these people from all over the world. I find, because I'm a learner, I like to read, I like to watch documentaries, I'm always interested in new information. So what I love about international students is I get to learn about their culture, the typical practices in their culture, something about their country. That's not something I was really getting in other jobs. So I find it very, very educational. And also the TOEFL itself is also very educational for me as well. I'm learning a lot of things I never knew. So I'm becoming like an encyclopedia for all my friends. So I guess what I like the most is just this range of personalities and this range of cultures that I get to meet and to learn from.
Yeah, so true. I think great teachers are really just great learners, great students. We always are looking for that knowledge, and that we have that curiosity about things. And so that's why we go on to teach, is because it's like, hey, I don't want to leave the classroom yet. I'm not done.
Right.
I want to learn some more.
Yeah, and you want to share it too, and you want to pass it on. So
absolutely.
Teaching. There's an expression like, by teaching you will learn, and by learning you will teach. So I've always believed that it's a two-way street. It's not just me throwing information at someone. I always learn something from my students. I've learned a lot from my students, so it's very enjoyable for me.
Absolutely. What advice would you have for the student, let's say, who is working full-time, maybe they're married with a family, maybe they have children, and here is this TOEFL test that they know they have to get a certain score on. How do they find the time to study? What advice would you give that person?
So I would tell that person there's a few strategies I would use. One would be the strategy for someone whose family doesn't want to participate. So if that person is on their own but has a family, I would say set up a schedule where you can go in a room and close the door, and that's your do not disturb time. So maybe it's half an hour before dinner or an hour after dinner, but there's an agreement in the family that you won't be disrupted during that time. The second is if there's family members that wish to participate. So, for example, if someone has a child who's a teenager who's quite good at English, let's say their child has been in English school for several years, they can engage that family member and have that child ask them like question one, especially question one on the speaking. That's where you can get the family the most involved. So your child could sit there and ask you question one and allow you as the test taker to answer and then give you feedback. So whenever someone has someone in their family that's good at English, I always tell that person, that individual is your greatest resource. So let's say you're an immigrant and you married an American and that person is a native speaker. That person is now your greatest resource because you can converse with that person. So you might have to negotiate that a little bit, but I do think it's important to get the family involved if that's possible. Of course, there are some people, many of my students, their family doesn't speak English at all either. So at that point, you will have to set up a do not disturb time. Because, getting distracted when you're studying is going to set you back quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I love, getting the kids involved because there's so many of my students, really learn a lot from their children. Children pick up language so quickly, at a younger age. And so I think that's a wonderful idea. And you have a little fun. I mean, both people, both sides have a little fun. And then, you get more relaxed with the questions too, especially that speaking task one, talk about a familiar topic. And it just makes it a fun way to study, I think. I think that's a great idea. Yeah. What are you currently offering for TOEFL students? Let's say they put that do not disturb on the door and they're like, I want to work with Kathy. Where did students go and what are you offering right now?
So my website is at www.houseoftoefl.com. And on my website, of course, I do one-on-one private tutoring, and that can be on Skype or on Zoom. And also on my website, you can get speaking evaluations and writing evaluations. There's a link that goes to my book as well. The link will simply take you to Amazon. There are free resources on my website as well. So if students are looking for something that's free, I have a blog. I update it quite a bit. And also I have embedded all my teaching videos into it too from YouTube. So you can also watch all my videos on my website as well. So my website is, I think, a pretty handy resource. There's quite a bit on there for students, whether they want to take lessons or they just want to watch a few videos or read a few blog posts. My website has all that stuff.
Okay, fantastic. And what lesson do you have coming up for us? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I decided, since I wrote a book about the reading, that I will make my lesson about the reading. So my lesson is going to be about the paraphrase question. Some people call it the sentence simplification question. So just to describe the question I'm talking about to the students, this is the one, there's usually one per reading, and the sentence is highlighted in gray, and they have to choose the sentence that from 4 choices that best reflects the information in the highlighted sentence. This one can be very challenging, very challenging. Even native speakers, I've even shown it to native speakers who have gotten it wrong. So I thought this might be something to make a video about that would be very helpful. Of course, there's a chapter in my book about it too, but that's what I decided to do my video about.
All right, fantastic. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for sharing your time and your talents with us on this webinar, and we look forward to your lesson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. This is Kathy from House of TOEFL, and thank you for joining me today on my short tutorial about the paraphrase question. Now, this is also called the sentence simplification question. In this reading question type, one sentence will be highlighted in gray, and you will be given 4 options. You must pick the sentence that is closest in meaning to the highlighted sentence. There is one of these question types per reading passage. Sometimes you might get a reading passage that does not have this question type, but you will never get a reading passage that has two. So usually you're going to have one per passage. Now, this is a good time if you would like to pause this video and try the question that I've put up here as an example. So go ahead and pause the video now and try the question. And we're back. Now, hopefully you picked the correct answer, which is actually the first answer, the answer number 1. And if you didn't, I hope by the end of this video, you will see the traps that are given in the other choices, and you will know how to avoid them in the future. So the first answer is correct. Now, I want to talk about a very important tip for this question type. This is actually the only question type in which I actually recommend taking some notes. Normally in the reading section, I say don't take any notes. This is the exception. So the reason for that is that it's a good idea to write down the main points of the highlighted sentence. That's because the highlighted sentence is very complex. It's easier to look at the main ideas of it. So your goal is to only examine the important ideas. You can remove the dependent clauses in your notes, then look at the 4 answer choices and find it much more easily. Let's take a look at an example of how this works. Imagine I get this sentence. The focus of life in ancient Greece was the agora, a marketplace where discussions about politics, philosophy, laws, and ethics took place, and people had the chance to meet others in person. On my paper, my notes might say, focus of life in ancient Greece equals the agora, marketplace. Discussions took place, people met in person. Notice I've eliminated the dependent clause. Where discussions about politics, philosophy, laws, and ethics took place. I eliminated that. I feel like that might not be important and might be rolled into 1 or 2 words in the correct paraphrase. So I eliminate it. Now, if I go to the answer choices and I find that this isn't working, I still can look at the original in gray, but normally this is a much more efficient way to do this. Now, the correct paraphrase is here on the bottom of the screen. In ancient Greece, life centered around the agora, a marketplace where people had the opportunity to meet and discuss many issues affecting society. As you can see, I did not need the dependent clause. I just made my life a lot easier by removing it. Now, here's some traps that you should avoid. These are what the ETS will normally use to trick you. The first is that they will change the main topic. Let's compare these 2 sentences. Single-use plastic bottles have an enormous impact on the environment because they take 1,000 years to decompose in landfills. The incorrect paraphrase is, the environment must be protected from sources of plastic such as bottles since they take a long time to decompose. Now, it looks good, but it has a different main topic. The main topic of the first sentence is plastic bottles, and in the second, it's the environment. So that is something you should not choose. That would be incorrect. The next trap is if the answer adds information. Let's compare these 2 sentences. France is one of the most important countries in the world from a historical and cultural perspective and has played a significant role in international affairs. This is incorrect. France has had a huge impact worldwide, both in regards to history and culture, and is a key country in reconciling international tensions. Because this adds international tensions. Tensions is not in the first sentence, so this is not correct. Now, if the answer choice is missing important information, it is also not correct. Let's compare these 2 sentences. Lake Bracciano is an immense lake of volcanic origin that is located in Italy and serves as a drinking reservoir for the city of Rome. An incorrect choice is, Lake Bracciano, a vast lake in Italy, stores a great deal of drinking water for people in Rome. This sentence is missing that the lake is of volcanic origin. The origins of the lake will obviously be very important, so this is not a correct paraphrase. Now, this is a very common one. The answer choice uses the wrong verb. Know your verbs. It's very common for them to use a different verb, a verb with a different meaning. So let's compare these 2. Lionfish are ferocious eaters, and their venomous spines help to protect them from the attacks of predators in the Atlantic Ocean. The incorrect paraphrase is, enormous eaters, lionfish also have venomous spines that are an asset, when they need to circumvent the predators that live in the Atlantic Ocean. This is because protect them and circumvent are very different in meaning. They are not synonyms. So this is incorrect. Know your verbs before the TOEFL. Now, the answer changes the meaning. This will not be correct. Let's compare these two sentences. The first one says, encouraging healthy populations is one of the biggest roles of art and culture in our lives, and studies have shown creativity helps to enhance both physical and mental health. This second sentence does not have the same meaning. It says, even though healthy populations are those that have engaged in art and culture, studies must be done to show how creativity impacts physical and mental health. In the first sentence, the studies were already done. In the second sentence, it says they must be done, meaning they must be done in the future. This is a different meaning and is not correct. So now this is a good place to pause the video and try to see if you can apply these traps and avoid the incorrect answer choices. So please go ahead and pause the video here. Okay, the correct answer is the fourth answer. Hopefully you got that. And let's look at why the other choices are incorrect. The first is incorrect because it's missing information. It doesn't mention the golden period at all. Now, the golden period means the peak. So if that's not mentioned, it can't be correct. The second information changes the meaning because in the first one, it's talking about how these caravans could travel long distances, they reached their golden period, and so on. But the second answer just says that they were used. Were used is not the same verb meaning as they could travel and they reached their golden period. So not only is there missing information, the verb meaning is changed in the second option. The third option adds information because it says exploit trade. That is not in the original sentence. There's nothing about exploiting trade. So immediately you would eliminate the third answer. So the fourth answer is the correct answer. And of course, you should read a lot more. This is only one question type. There are many others on the TOEFL. And in my book, Mastering the Reading for the TOEFL IBT, that's available on Amazon, I go through every question type, and I have the tricks, the traps, and many, many more examples than were shown in this video. And finally, thank you for watching this video. And you can reach me through my website at www.houseoftoefl.com. And as always, good luck on your TOEFL test.